Iranian President Hassan Rouhani arrives in Paris, hailing a new chapter in relations with Europe as Tehran attempts to rebuild business ties with the West. Greek leader Alexis Tsipras visits Israel with his entire cabinet ahead of a trilateral summit tomorrow in Cyprus to discuss natural gas cooperation. And events are held throughout the globe marking International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which commemorates the victims of the Nazi genocide. Thank you for staying with us. The IDF's chief of staff recently talked about the many threats Israel faces in the security arena, from Hezbollah in the north to Hamas and Islamic State in the south. The challenges are formidable, as I-24 News defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari and Matthias Inbar report.
3 fronts, each representing separate threats to the state of Israel. Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot, the IDF's chief of staff, recently conveyed a security forecast for 2016. On the northern front, Israel faces the challenge posed by Hezbollah.
Hezbollah, as the organization which today poses the most severe threat against the state of Israel, is armed, financed, trained, and even run since 2006 by the Iranians.
The IDF does not expect Hezbollah to benefit significantly from the lifting of international sanctions previously imposed on its Iranian masters, as Tehran is expected to spend most of the incoming funds internally. While Hezbollah is not currently interested in a conflict with Israel, a minor border skirmish could easily spiral out of control. The group has the means to shoot down aircraft, as well as threaten Israeli naval vessels, and is thought to be digging tunnels under the border, like Hamas in Gaza. Hezbollah has also gained valuable battlefield experience in Syria, though it has also lost about 1,300 fighters. On the southern front, 2 threats, Islamic State in the Sinai, and Hamas and various IS-affiliated Salafist groups based in the Gaza Strip. For its part, Hamas is thought to have already rearmed following the 7-week war with Israel in 2014, and the group continues to dig offensive tunnels under Israeli territory. One of these reportedly collapsed Tuesday, with at least 8 people said to have been crushed to death. Finally, there is the threat of Palestinian terrorism in Israel and the West Bank. The current wave of violence has claimed the lives of 30 people and wounded more than 250 Israeli citizens. According to the IDF, the situation could intensify, with more firearm and even suicide attacks perpetrated. But the military also emphasizes another point.
Despite the current terror wave, we insist that there be a separation between terrorists and the regular population, and that 120,000 Palestinians go to work daily in Israeli cities and industrial zones in Judea and Samaria.
The chief of staff has emphasized the importance of Palestinians being able to provide for their families, which can have an overall restraining effect on the level of violence.
And I'm joined now in studio by I-24 News defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari. Shai, good evening.
Good evening, Anna.
Shai, it's a very interesting statement by the Lieutenant General Eisenkot. It seems that it would go against what Netanyahu has been saying about the cause of terrorism being incitement, not economic reasons. Are we seeing a disparity between how the IDF and the government profile terrorists?
We're seeing more and more indications, I would say, of a difference of opinion within the quarters of Israeli power. You could say we don't see open criticism coming from the IDF against the government or against the prime minister, but it is very interesting to note the differences in the message, different messages really coming out from the IDF and the government offices respectively. While Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken numerous times about the need to revoke work permits in the wake of terrorism, we heard in the statement from the chief of staff there basically emphasizing the importance of the ability to make a living in the context of really restraining violence and reducing the level of terrorism. Following certain attacks in the current terror wave, we have seen temporary bans on Palestinians coming into settlements or other Israeli communities in a work context, but those bans are typically taken off after a day or two, and the IDF officers are saying we are the ones who are pushing to limit those measures.
And Shai, we saw in your report the several threats that Israel is facing. Do the IDF and the government also disagree on which one is the greatest?
No, I would say here we see more or less basically there's agreement on these various points, and it's maybe something that we also need to mention. There is an assumption that the Islamic State, when you talk about its presence in the Sinai Desert, that it eventually will turn towards Israel. The assumption of the security forces that eventually we will see some sort of attack carried out on that front.
And in news, Shai, about the developments in the investigation of terrorist Nishat Milham, who killed 2 people in Tel Aviv, what has been revealed?
Yeah, the police have basically been making a lot of statements, as well as Shin Bet today, in regards to this ongoing investigation. It appears that there was some sort of intent on the behalf of Nishat Milham to carry out another attack. Once he had made it back to Ara, he was apparently intent on carrying out some sort of attack in a major urban city afterwards. Many materials have been released from the phone which belonged to Nishat Milham, which he basically lost on the morning of the attack in Tel Aviv. It was found in Tel Aviv. We've seen all sorts of videos released from this phone where he often filmed himself. Also materials that indicate really he was influenced by all sorts of Islamist materials, indicating some sort of identification with general IS ideology or Salafist jihadi ideology. Let's see a clip of that, perhaps.
You are mistaken about us, and you think we are not important. You are mistaken about our master, the Prophet. We live here on this land. This thing will not take place. This, with God's help, will not come to pass. With God's help, the next event will occur close to Tel Aviv. The Jews will understand with whom they are dealing.
Yes, Nishat Milham also, it turns out, had the help of 3 people in hiding away there in Ara for about a week until he was found and taken out. They were basically brought to court and charged. One of them is a family member who actually found the hideaway apartment in which he was able to hide for a considerable amount of time.
Yes, Shai Ben-Ari, we look forward to you filling us in on further details in this investigation. Thank you very much for this. And now, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is on a 2-day trip to China, where he said that Washington and Beijing agreed on the need for a strong UN resolution against North Korea. For its part, China's foreign minister vowed not to militarize the contentious South China Sea, as Taylor reports.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry began a 2-day visit to China Wednesday, during which he's expected to press Beijing for more curbs on North Korea, after Pyongyang said it successfully conducted a test of a miniaturized hydrogen nuclear device. Kerry believes that bringing China, North Korea's main backer, on board will help enforce international sanctions.
And we look forward to working with China, which China agreed today to do, to engage in an accelerated effort at the United Nations, instructing both of our representatives to work together to try to achieve an understanding about the strong resolution that introduces significant new measures to curtail North Korea's ability to advance its prescribed nuclear and ballistic missile programs.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi agreed.
We also agreed for the UN Security Council to take further action and pass a new resolution. China is willing, on the basis of necessity, to conduct comprehensive and in-depth negotiations with the US, and all sides with a responsible attitude.
Finding a way forward on easing tension in the South China Sea is also a priority for Kerry. China has been building up facilities on islands it controls, angering regional countries and drawing criticism from Washington. Bilateral trade and cybersecurity are among issues also expected to figure predominantly during Kerry's visit.
Yes, now to the U.S. and another surprise move by the Republican presidential frontrunner. Just 5 days before the Iowa caucuses, Donald Trump has decided to pull out of tomorrow's debate. ABC News has more.
He's out. Donald Trump says he will not participate in Thursday's Republican debate hosted by Fox News.
I won't be doing the debate. I'm going to have something else in Iowa. We'll do something where we raise money for the veterans and the wounded warriors. We're going to do something simultaneously with the debate.
Trump furious at Fox News. On Tuesday, he posted this message to social media, attacking Megyn Kelly, one of the debate moderators.
Megyn Kelly's really biased against me. She knows that, I know that, everybody knows that. Do you really think she can be fair at a debate?
Fox News responding with a press release, mocking Trump, reading in part, "We learned from a secret back channel that the Ayatollah and Putin both intend to treat Donald Trump unfairly. And Trump has his own secret plan to replace the cabinet with his Twitter followers."
They can't toy with me like they toy with everybody else. So let them have their debate, and let's see how they do with the ratings.
As for Megyn Kelly,
this is a lightweight. This is not a reporter. This, to me, is just a lightweight. Megyn Kelly shouldn't be in the debate.
the Fox News anchor saying overnight her question to Trump in the first debate about his treatment of women was fair game.
I maintain it was a tough but fair question, and we agreed to disagree.
I asked Trump if his rivals will now use this to their advantage.
Do you think by skipping the debate they're going to attack your temperament? Do you think by skipping the debate?
No, I think my temperament's great. I mean, I built a great corporation. I built a great company. But I think when Fox sends out their little, like, written by a child about Putin, et cetera, then I say let them have their debate.
But overnight, Senator Ted Cruz insinuating Trump is scared of Megyn Kelly.
If he's unwilling to stand on the debate stage with the other candidates, then I would like to invite Donald right now to engage in a one-on-one debate with me anytime between now and the Iowa caucuses.
Yes, and now for more on Trump, I'm joined in studio by Owen Alterman, researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies. Good evening, Mr. Alterman.
Good evening.
Well, what do you make of Trump's decision? Is he really out, or is this only a teaser for an even bigger surprise?
It doesn't even matter. The man has an unquenchable appetite for eating news cycles. This is all about dominating media coverage. The Iowa caucuses are only 5 days away. There's only a limited amount of time that candidates can get access to the media, and Trump is determined to deny them that access. The only thing we're talking about today in this studio and in every other TV studio where they're talking about the U.S. elections is Donald Trump and this debate and Megyn Kelly. You won't hear anything about Rubio or Christie or Bush or even Cruz or any of the other candidates. That's the game that Trump is playing.
You could argue that this has been the secret to his success all along.
Absolutely. It's amazing. The data journalist Nate Silver has been saying for months that eventually the other candidates would catch up to Trump in media coverage. That is, it's easy for Trump to dominate news cycles in June, in July, and in August. But as the voting gets closer, the other candidates are going to get more attention and voters are going to get more serious. We're now 5 days away from the first contest. It hasn't really happened. Trump is dominating the coverage today, January 28th, the same way he did June 28th, July 28th, or August 28th. It's really an amazing achievement.
You know, just a few days ago, of course, he said he could shoot someone and not lose any of his voters. Looking at the polls, it seems he's right.
He has dominated the polls, too, ever since the weeks after he announced, again, because of the domination of the media coverage, because of his tactics, and because of his message that's been consistent, whether one agrees with it or, like many of us, disagrees with it. As a politician, this man is the most talented politician in the United States since Bill Clinton.
Would you say Hillary Clinton has now reason to worry, seeing his continued success in the campaign?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that, again, this is a tremendous political athlete, a man with amazing political talents, whether one agrees or disagrees with him. On the other hand, Trump, if he gets the nomination, and that still hasn't happened, and there's still a lot of obstacles to that, and there's still a lot of things he'll craft across in order to do that. But if he does get the nomination, he does start with a disadvantage in that he has very high unfavorable ratings among independents, and he will have a lot of convincing to do in the election, and he's positioned himself well for a Republican primary electorate, people who are more conservative, more right-wing, but in terms of a general election where he has to get votes from a wider spectrum of voters and a wider spectrum of Americans, he does start with a kind of disadvantage that Clinton could exploit.
Well, Owen Alterman, thank you very much for helping us make sense of a story that rarely does make sense. Thank you for being with us tonight.
My pleasure.
And now, French Justice Minister Christiane Taubira resigned today as Parliament took up a controversial proposal to strip convicted terrorists of their citizenship in certain circumstances. Tamara Ziv has the details.
French Justice Minister Christiane Taubira's decision to step down on Wednesday was apparently a reaction to government efforts to strip citizenship from convicted French-born terrorists with dual nationality. Taubira, popular among the ruling socialists of President François Hollande, but a target of criticism from right-wing politicians, already aired her opinion on the matter a year ago, explicitly stating that she didn't agree with the idea of stripping citizenship on France into radio. As the announcement of her resignation came on Wednesday, she tweeted, "Sometimes to resist means staying, sometimes resisting means leaving." Taubira has been at the center of controversy, whether as the victim of racial slurs or as she pioneered the country's same-sex marriage bill, despite fierce opposition from conservatives in the country. But her latest battle saw her unable to see eye to eye, even with members of her own party, over this controversial loss of nationality measure. Following Taubira's resignation, the French president's office said she would be replaced by Jean-Jacques Auvois, who is widely regarded as more supportive of Prime Minister Manuel Valls and Hollande. Hollande called for the loss of nationality measure to be written into the constitution following the November jihadist attacks in Paris, which left 130 people dead. It's part of a series of measures meant to boost security as hundreds of French citizens, many holding dual nationality, leave to fight alongside the Islamic State group in Iraq and Syria, and in the case of the attackers, return to wreak devastation in France.
Yes, to economy news now. In Israel's electric grid was recently struck by one of the biggest cyber attacks in the country's history. This came to light at an annual conference in Tel Aviv, which points a spotlight on emerging trends in the high-tech security market. I-24 News economy correspondent Daniel Roth was there.
Crowds from around the world gathered this week at the Tel Aviv exhibition grounds for the two-day CyberTech 2016 conference, which is billed as the biggest cyber conference outside of the United States. True to the size of this conference, which included among the keynote speakers Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, one of the companies on the event floor was technology mainstay IBM. And one of the central emerging issues on the cyber agenda is balance between data security and infrastructure.
Cybersecurity is about protecting organizations from attacks not just to the internet and web-based systems, but increasingly it's about the Internet of Things, or what IBM would call a smarter planet. So think about connected cars. During 2015, we saw some of the first attacks against connected vehicles.
One of the other companies at the exhibition was Argus, which specializes in automotive security, an important new field as cars go from computerized to self-driving in coming years. And with Chrysler's 1.4 million car recall due to a hacking scare last summer, the need is clear.
3 veteran officers of the Israeli 8200 unit, which cybersecurity is their bread and butter, thought of what would be the next big challenge for IoT cybersecurity, and they came up with the idea of cars and connected cars. They seem to be the most relevant and promising area in which they'll be able to put their knowledge into practice.
According to the Gartner research firm, security technology spending is slated to grow from $77 billion last year to over $100 billion in 2019. And Israel is a major part of that, with 430 so-called cyber companies operating in the country. In the pavilion space, Israel's electric company was set up with CyberGym, an Israeli program to train companies to properly take care of their security needs. And the message there, too, was that there's a growing need for focus on material, not just data security needs.
Definitely there have been attacks. We've just seen the recent one in Ukraine, which is public knowledge now, although it was kept secret for a while, and we have seen others in the past.
Meanwhile, Israel is reportedly looking to put limits on exporting some of its advances for security reasons. And cyber in Israel is in its early stages, with nearly half of its companies still in product development, according to a report from high-tech database IVC. At the same time, Weave, an industry mapping startup, says that Israel's unique factor is the major investment from the Office of the Chief Scientist.
Before I made this map, the cyber industry or sector was just a blurb for me. I had no idea who are the players in the industry, how big the industry is, no tools to equivalent it to other industries. So the first insight is just seeing the map.
Here at CyberTech 2016 in Tel Aviv, it's clear that Israel is not only on the cyber technology map, but creating it. This is Daniel Roth for I-24 News.
Yes, and Daniel Roth joins me now on the News Today map. Good evening, Daniel.
Good evening.
Well, Daniel, we saw that you were at the SciTech conference. There was a very controversial remark there made by Yuval Steinitz, Minister Steinitz there.
Yes, so the minister announced that there had been a thwarted attack on Israel's electric infrastructure. Not a lot of information beyond that, not who did it, not exactly what happened, but that programmers were put into action and created a counter program and stopped this. That was the announcement. Beyond that, there's not really much there. But it really did play into one of the big themes at the conference, which was, the last few decades of cybersecurity has been focused on data security, protecting information that banks have, that retailers have, that your email account has. Now this is the new focus is infrastructure. This is where the industry is going. We saw Argus, we saw other examples of this. IBM's focused on that now. It's really sort of focused on infrastructure, and for a real reason, ostensibly. And not just big companies like IBM, countries too are battling this out. China and the US are accusing each other back and forth of cyber hacking. Absolutely, and we hear now and then sort of the focus of warfare is really online these days, that all the time China, the US, Russia, Israel, Iran, that in the case of Stuxnet, this American-Israeli program that was a virus in an Iranian system, it's really happening. So every now and then the secret comes out and you see some piece of data or some infrastructure actually get affected, but most of it is really kind of invisible to us. You go to a conference like this and it's sort of revealed that this is what everyone's talking about. What was the highlight for you at the conference, Daniel? I think definitely there was a booth with lightsabers. We got to ask them why they chose to be Jedis as opposed to be on the dark side. It was a lot of fun. So you had fun at the conference. You came back with one big declaration for us, one thing that you have for us from there? Yeah, I think Israel is really at the forefront, and it's really interesting to look at what Israel is doing. This is one of the big takeaways, of course, from Cybertech in Tel Aviv. Always interesting to look at what Israel is doing in all regards. Daniel Roth, thank you very much for that. Thanks. And now the weeks-long standoff at a federal natural reserve in Oregon has ended, with one person killed during a confrontation between protesters and police who were trying to end the siege. I-24 News correspondent Uri Shapira has the story.
After almost a month-long standoff by anti-government militia in the U.S. state of Oregon, authorities managed to clear the occupied wildlife reserve Tuesday. The FBI said gunshots at the site began after officers arrested Ammon Bundy, the head of the ranchers group near the refuge, while he and his partners were on their way to a community meeting at the senior center in John Day, 400 kilometers from Portland. Outside the site, protesters condemned the arrest and claimed police injustice.
What do you believe when you say peaceful resolution and then you kill one of my friends, and you say you can safely leave and yet you've arrested somebody who's not even here? What do you believe anymore?
The saga began on January 2nd, when a group of ranchers decided to take over the federal wildlife refuge to protest the arrest of two of their colleagues for burning federal lands. What started as a local dispute evolved into a national discussion regarding the purpose of public lands.
We're not doing this to be activists. We're making a stand on the Constitution, and we have work that needs to be done. We need to be able to unwind all these unconstitutional transactions.
The story also raised questions on the appropriate response to an armed takeover. Ever since the crisis erupted, authorities did little to end it, and the occupation stretched into weeks. This may also raise the question of what would have happened if members of the militia were not Caucasians. Different questions which divide America.
And now for sports, with I-24 News Sports Magazine host Jonathan Regev. Good evening, Jonathan.
Evening, Ayman.
Well, Jonathan, you've been telling me about the Australian Open for a while. What's happening now that it's reaching the final stages?
Don't look for me tomorrow at 10:30 in the morning Israeli time, 7:30 p.m. Melbourne time, because that is the time when the semifinal will begin between Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic. I'll dare to say these are the two greatest tennis players of this generation. Yes, Djokovic right now is the better player, world number one, defending champion, but Roger Federer, 17-time Grand Slam champion, so he wants number 18 so much. Can he do it? He's clearly the underdog against Novak Djokovic, just like any other player today. But if there is anyone who can beat Novak Djokovic these days, it's Federer with all the ability, the experience. It's going to be a great match, that's for sure. if you'd ask me to bet, I'll go with Djokovic, but it's going to be a huge matchup, that one.
I will be WhatsApping you intentionally at that time tomorrow morning to see if you are...
You know what will happen? You will see 1v, no 2.
1v,
no 2, and certainly no blue. 1.
Well, you know who else is having bigger trouble than 1v? It's Brazil,
Yes.
as if it needed any more trouble ahead of the Olympics.
Yes, the last thing Brazil needed is this thing we came to know as the Zika virus. There's financial crisis, there's the environmental issue with the Guanabara Bay, and now the Zika virus, which we heard this week with the World Health Organization announcing this may spread to all of the Americas, and Brazil is one of them. And there we see cleaning teams putting insecticides, and there we see some of the venues are already up and standing, and they're already spraying them. Yes, there's 6 months to go, even more. And yet they want to make sure everything is ready, and at least that is something that can be prevented. It's the last thing Brazil needs. Once again, I have to say about Brazil, all these concerns we're raising now were raised 2 years ago ahead of the World Cup, which went by pretty much. It was a good World Cup. So do I think it's going to be a good games in Rio? Yes. And yet, the Zika virus was the last thing they needed.
So you are optimistic, though, that they will be on schedule and on time?
I think so.
And the World Cup wasn't good for Brazil.
No, semi-final was terrible. And I don't know how they'll do on the field. Semi-final, that losing 7-1 against Germany. As someone who grew up in Argentina, it makes me smile every time I remember that. But structural-wise, with all the infrastructure and things, they were ready. I think it's going to be the same for the Rio Olympics.
And my notes here say fat bike. Jonathan Regev, explain.
Fat bike. It's basically bicycle on the snow, and since it's in Switzerland, these are the initial images. They play that horn or whatever it is. Why is it fat bike? Because look at the wheels of these bicycles. They're very, very wide, and of course that's what you have to do to ride in the snow. I do not understand why you'd want to ride on a bicycle in the snow. I ride here to work every once in a while. It's not on snow, it never snows here, but it looks beautiful. The images are very, very nice, and this is a competition, a traditional one in Switzerland. Fat bike, that's what it's called.
Well, I thought it was because of the cows that we saw
yes,
at the beginning of this
maybe
video.
That too.
Jonathan Regev, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ayman.
Coming up next on our program, today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Where does anti-Semitism stand in Europe today? And how is Israel taking care of its own Holocaust survivors? I'll be joined by 2 guests for tonight's debate. But first, the headlines with an update from our news desk. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Stay with us.